Hello, in this video I'm going to show you 5 unusual exotic plants that need no help to get through winters and look stunning in summer and autumn. This is Amicia zygomaris, an herbaceous returning perennial plant or shrub, and it grows to about 3.5 meters tall at a push, at least 2 meters of growth in an area where you don't have the most favourable conditions, but in my garden it's over 3 meters tall. And what is really interesting about this plant are the leaves. The leaves are a very unusual shape with an indentation at the end, and what's more interesting about the leaves is as evening comes and as we approach darkness, the leaves actually fold up like a book closing in on itself, continuing inwards, and it looks like the whole plant, the whole foliage is collapsing, and that is just something it does naturally every single evening. It's a really unusual feature about this plant. Another unusual feature are these purple appendages on the stems, which aren't flowers or leaves, they just form all the way up, and it just gives you some extra interest on this plant. And it does flower as well. Right at the top there, we've got lots of yellow pea-like flowers like you find on broom or gorse. And in terms of size, this is quite a well-established plant now. This is pretty much the full size it gets, but it grows from quite a tight crown on the base and it fills out, and this is about 2 meters across and 3 meters tall, something like that. All this foliage dies back in winter. It's herbaceous, so you can cut it right down to the base, and then in spring, in sort of April time into May, new foliage will appear from below ground level and very quickly push up. So by June, you have a nice plant about 1.5 to 2 meters tall, and at the height of summer into autumn, it'll reach its full size and potential. A great plant that's not need any protection, although I do like to put some mulch over the top in previous years when it's been very cold. But even last year when we saw -7.7, this had no protection whatsoever, and it's come back as strong as ever. It's not been weakened by that cold temperatures. So a great, pretty much hardy plant for the UK and northern climates, and an unusual plant that you can just forget about in winter because it's completely cut down, grows quickly in spring, always gets the attention of garden visitors because of its unusual foliage, and a very contrasting plant to other exotics you may want to grow as well. It doesn't spread or seed about anywhere, so it's not invasive whatsoever, so it's a great plant to have in the garden. This is Hedicium forestii, the perfect ginger for your garden. I say it's perfect because it's trouble-free. No pests or diseases attack this plant. It's very hardy. I've never had issues with this. It's been down to -10 and it's come back. Even when it was in a pot very early on, it came back, and it just gets bigger and better every year. This has been in this spot for about 5-6 years, and as you can see, it's just over 2 meters tall and it's about 1.5 meters wide. The leaves are especially large for a ginger or Hedicium, so they're about 40 centimeters long, something like that, and it flowers as well, and the flowers start at the end of August, peak probably in early to mid-September in most years, and go on into early October. So we've just got a few flowers left. They do have a nice scent, albeit quite faint, but it's a bit more pronounced in the evening and nighttime when moths like to visit the flowers. In the daytime, you'll find butterflies on these flowers as well, so they're pretty good for nature as a nectar resource. Very hardy, like I said. You don't need to mulch it whatsoever, it'll just come back. But if you want to err on the side of caution, yes, you can mulch this with some spent compost or straw or something like that. But it's herbaceous, so soon as the first frosts arrive, it will blacken the foliage. You cut it down to the base, put your mulch on if you wish, and then just relax over winter. It doesn't need to be worried about at all because it'll come back. It comes back relatively late, so you won't really see this plant till May, but it'll quickly form a nice clump, and by midsummer it'll be head height, if not taller. And you can split it, so you can grow it in various parts of your garden. It prefers sort of dappled sunlight, so it wants some shelter to get the biggest, luscious leaves, but it will cope with full sun, it will cope with pretty dark shade as well, but you might not get a bigger plant or as many flowers if you're growing it in sort of darker shady areas. But I've grown this in many areas of my garden. It's never failed me yet. I've been growing it for about 12, 13 years. It's probably the best ginger Hedicium for the garden. So easy to grow. Like I said, nothing to worry about with this plant, and it just gives you stunning foliage and very delicate flowers as well. So this is Bootea Aerospatha, one of the most elegant, stunning feather palms that can grow in the Northern Hemisphere in places like the UK and Northern Europe, because although it's a feather palm, it's one of the hardier feather palms. Not as hardy as Jabea chinensis, but pretty much the next best thing in terms of hardiness. So hardy down to -8 with no particular issues, and it should survive dips down to -10, -12 at a push. But if you live in an area where you don't get those cold temperatures, it's well worth looking out for and planting in your garden. It will grow into a rather large palm, but as you can see here, well, from my experience for the last 10 years or so, yes, it's over 2 meters tall, this plant now, but it's taken over 10 years to get to this size from a small plant, and it just fills this space really nicely. It's got the greenest of green leaves, but this can vary. There are sort of bluer, greyer variations as well, but the leaves are just hardy basically. So this has had no protection whatsoever. It's seen down to -8, and it's just grown year on year, lots of new leaves from the centre, and it's filled out nicely to cover this area. And the soil it's actually growing in my garden is pretty free draining, sort of. It's a mixture of rubble, sandy soil with some added organic material as well, and it just looks so healthy, very easy to grow. Doesn't particularly need much feeding, it just gets all the nutrients from the ground, but you can give it a spring dressing of bloodfish and bone, or perhaps some chicken manure in the season as well. But it just gets on with it. It doesn't need any additional watering, it doesn't need any staking or wind protection or anything like that. It just grows into a beautiful palm tree, and over the years this will get bigger and bigger and cover a larger area. But like a lot of plants, it does stay in one place. It doesn't spread about, doesn't send out suckers like some bamboos or herbaceous plants do. It's one solid trunk that will generally just go up higher and higher over the years and go across maybe 3.5 meters, something like that. A beautiful palm tree for sort of cool temperate gardens, and it's one that I wouldn't be without. So this is my blue bamboo. This is Orinda Papyrif 1046, and it's a stunning addition to any garden. It has these amazing blue culms or canes, these nice papery sheaves that do fall off to expose that blueness, and the white sheen on top of that as well. And it grows pretty big, but the best thing about it is it doesn't spread erratically across the garden. It is a true clump forming bamboo. So this one's been here 5-6 years now, and it's about 1 meter across, 1 meter diameter, and it started off at about sort of 30-40 centimeters, and it's slowly spread in all directions, but it hasn't sent runners across the garden. It grows tall, so this is over 4 meters tall. The mother plant just over there is somewhat bigger as well, but if you give it the space, it will provide you with colour all year round, and it won't be overbearing in the garden, providing you plant it in a suitable location. So it wants to be somewhere that's not in full force of northerly winds in winter, so it wants a little bit of shelter, and it also wants to be growing in some good sort of heavy soil, plenty of moisture in there, so plenty of manure, and also make sure that it's in an area that doesn't dry out. So either water it well in summer, or just have that heavy sort of clay soil or loamy soil with added manure in an area that doesn't dry out too much, and it will grow into a stunning plant like this that doesn't need any winter protection. It looks good all year round, but especially in summer and autumn when the leaves are at their greenest and fullest and the blue culms have been exposed from the fresh flush of growth from summer. This plant here is a Stelia Red Devil, and it comes from the southern hemisphere, but it grows very well in the northern hemisphere. And you might read that this plant is only hardy to -4, -5, -6. Well, I've found that this plant is much hardier than that. I've had this plant over 10 years, about 12 years now, in 2 different gardens, and it's seen easily down to -8. I think in my old garden it saw down to -10 as well, and it's been planted out and it's just slowly got bigger. But as you can see, compared to me, it's not a large plant, but it's great filler plant if you want it in sort of like a Mediterranean style garden, arid style garden. It wants a bit of shade, so this has got shade from the Jabea palm behind and my archway over that way, and you get these wonderful silvery undersides of the leaves that you find in pretty much all the Stelias. But the opposite side, the top side, got a nice brown bronzy sheen as well as a bit of that silver coming through. Nice graceful arching leaves, fills a nice space, and it's a nice alternative to phormiums or grasses. It does flower as well, but the flowers are very sort of hidden by the foliage and not really worth seeking out. It's really just the foliage why we grow this plant, but it never gets any pests or diseases, never gets spotting or fungal diseases on this. Just a great doer, great hardy but exotic plant that you don't see everywhere. Just a great plant to seek out and grow in your garden. If you want to know more about other hardy exotic plants that need no protection throughout winter and look good all year round, then check out this video for my top choices of hardy exotics.